a new label, young mockers, and tech frenemies. We'll tackle this on the debut of Season 2 on the Use Your Head podcast. Happy New Year from me to you. This is the Use Your Head podcast. My name is John McLean. Welcome to 2025 and a brand new season, Season 2, Episode 1 of the Use Your Head podcast. What has changed from Season 1? Absolutely nothing. Except the weather's a lot colder than the last time we were together. Hope wherever you are staying warm. We are expecting in the Dallas area for us kind of a winter apocalypse later this week. I mean, the panic in the media is just, it's you have to laugh at it because, you know, in a way down here, people, it's true. When you hear that Texans can't drive in the snow, that's absolutely true. We really can't drive in the rain either. And in fact, when it's dry, it's not terribly safe out there. However, we are expecting between, depending on who you ask and where you go, between 1 and I'm hearing now 7 inches of snow in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex on Thursday and Friday. The truth will fall somewhere in between, and likely here it'll be that wintry mix, which is worse than snow. And anyway, I'm all stocked up. I've got plenty of everything, and so we're good to go. Hope wherever you are that you're staying warm. It's already walloped the Midwest. And it's cold. Old man winter is here. Hope you had a great new year, safe and happy and all that good stuff. And you're off to a inspiring new 2025. We are here as well. Our email address has also not changed. John@useyourheadpodcast.com. This remains the show where we look at the issues and sometimes the problems and sometimes the funny stuff that happens. We look at our culture today and what the experts are saying, and we apply our own personal logic to that. We use our heads, and so I hope that I'll inspire you to do the same. I will do it here on the podcast, and hope that you will think and come up with your own answers and not just flow down the stream on the lazy river, as we say. That's not the way to live. Let's use what the good Lord gave us and use our heads. And with that, we move on to our very first topic of 2025. Topic number 1, I'm calling a new label. This article comes from Axios.com. We'll have a couple of articles, and in fact, I'll sneak preview you here. The first 2 topics today will segue with one another. They're very, very closely related. So first, topic number 1, a new label. This article from Axios written by Tina Reed. Tina calls it Surgeon General Advisory Adds to Mixed Messages on Alcohol. Now, this kind of ties into when we ended the year. I talked about, how they were talking about all these, these bartenders came up with all these weird recipes, to fight the hangover you're going to have on New Year's Day. And, my whole thing was when I use my head, it's not a foregone conclusion you're going to have one. You could exercise some self-discipline, have a good time, have a drink or two if you want, but it doesn't mean you have to get bombed and then be sick on the first day of the year. So you remember we talked about that. Well, this is interesting. We'll just get to the article here. Here's how it begins. The debate over the health effects of alcohol consumption is picking up with mixed messages on the risks of imbibing. While there's growing evidence supporting abstinence, U.S. guidelines still suggest moderate drinking is safe. The arguments over what to tell consumers will play out ahead of an anticipated new edition of the U.S. dietary guidelines that are due out later this year, per the New York Times. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy on Friday called for the U.S. to adopt cancer warning labels on alcoholic beverages similar to the ones mandated for cigarettes. All right, time out. So we've had cigarette labels and all tobacco, so smokeless and smoked tobacco. We've had, the various versions of the Surgeon General warning label, right? That's known to us. Well, the current Surgeon General wants to slap something similar on booze. All right, article continues on. This falls in line with a 2023 warning from the World Health Organization about the cancer risks associated with alcohol consumption. But Murthy's advisory came just weeks after the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, which helps inform the federal guidelines, issued a report that found moderate drinking may lessen the risk of dying or having heart attacks and strokes compared with complete abstinence. The National Academies found some increased risk for breast and colorectal cancer, but made no broader connection with most other cancers. Time out. All right, so I'm reading this. First of all, the World Health Organization, whatever. I've lost a lot of First of all, it's run by a communist. Second of all, these are opinions by people that have vast agendas. All right, let's just come out in the open. I'm not saying it's like Spectre. This is an evil organization that's out to destroy mankind. But I'm saying there's some bad actors in there, and so we can't just take what the World Health Organization. Well, it must be right. I mean, they want what's best for mankind. Not necessarily. And we learned that during COVID, didn't we? Okay, so enough about that. What's interesting, though, is that Murthy is announcing that he wants this label on booze right after another academy, this is the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, has said, you know what, we think that moderate drinking actually is good for you. All right. And we've known for a long time that a little bit of red wine is good for your blood. It helps with heart disease and so forth. I mean, that's been known for some time, and that makes sense. Moderately. That doesn't mean you can take a box of wine from the grocery store and pound the whole thing. But they did admit that, they found some increased risk for breast and colorectal cancer. All right. But they made no broader connection with most others. So connecting with the article here, it goes on. It's confusing for people, said Jody Hoyos of the Prevent Cancer Foundation. Even all the guideline bodies have had difficulty over the past decades in coming to conclusions, but the connection between cancer risk and alcohol has been clear in the research. According to Murthy's advisory, alcohol use is the third leading preventable cause of cancer in the U.S. after tobacco and obesity, and contributes nearly 100,000 cancer cases and about 20,000 cancer deaths annually. The most important thing is to be aware of the risks. Be honest with your physician so that they can implement the right screenings and the right help if you want to quit or if you want to decrease the amount, said Rebecca Mixad, Chief Medical Officer of Color Health, a health tech company that provides cancer detection services. All right, time out. So using our head, what are we looking here? Look, I don't have a problem with labels. All right. I really don't, because here's a couple reasons why. For one thing, they're not bans. All right. They're not bans, and they don't impede freedom. All right. If I'm a smoker, all right, and I used to be many moons ago, I never once looked at that label and thought, oh, should I light this up? No, you pop one out, you light it. You're aware, and you're making a choice, knowing that there is a risk associated with that choice. It's not a ban. All right. The label there doesn't hurt anything. Now, there may be some people that look at that and go, oh, you know what? Maybe I should quit. And that's a fine thing. Okay. So I don't have a problem with labels. And oh, by the way, we've had them for years. Okay. Some people read them and some people heed them. And then some people read them and don't heed them, and some people ignore them. But they're just labels. Whatever. The main thing I thought about, a couple of things. One, label requirements will add costs to manufacturing, at least initially. Okay. And that's going to drive prices up. Always does. That's simple economics. B, high prices can and often do curb use. And I think, and I don't have numbers on this, but I think that when the cigarette label was mandated many moons ago, that we probably did see a decrease in smoking. Okay. People made the choice. And again, I'm all for this. All right. I don't like bans. All right. But I do like, if you want to warn people, fine. Let them make their own decisions. But I think really, using my head, a lot of the reduction in smoking was an economic thing because taxes have gone way up on tobacco products in recent years. And, frankly, if you used to pay $2 for a pack and now you're paying $9, $10 for a pack in some places, maybe even more. I don't know. That can be a significant factor in deciding, you know what, I'm going to find me another vice because that's usually what happens, right? Which kind of segues into topic number 2. And to do that, what we're going to do here is we are going to segue into topic number 2 by reading the last line of the article from topic number 1. How confusing is that? Here's what it says. Back to the article. Americans, in fact, are already drinking less. fueled in particular by younger generations, or skipping the booze altogether for zero-proof drinks. And with that, the Use Your Head podcast segues smoothly to topic number 2, young mockers. This article also, as it happens, is from Axios, written by Jaden Amos. The rise of the mocktail. I called this cleverly, I think, young mockers. Here's what Jaden says. Dominating social media feeds, the mocktail is seemingly everywhere. The non-alcoholic beverage sector is expanding rapidly as alcohol consumption declines, a trend driven by Gen Z and millennials. The mocktails aren't new, but their popularity has soared over the past 5 years, according to research from Nielsen IQ. The rise of wellness culture and the decreased interest in alcohol have led to the growth of non-alcoholic drinks, even for people who aren't sober. Okay, time out. I'm one of these people, okay? I am sober by choice. I stopped drinking many years ago, just got tired of it, and frankly, economics was part of that decision. It got really expensive, and I was like, you know what? I've had my fill, I've had a lot of fun, and I'm kind of done with it. I don't enjoy it anymore. Why do it? So I have been sober for some time now, almost 10 years, in fact. Others who are recovering alcoholics are obviously sober, trying to be, as they're, living that lifestyle now. And then there are some, like in this article, that aren't sober, but they're just cutting back. They don't have it. I love this idea of decreased interest in alcohol. Isn't this interesting? The article continues and lists some data. Athletic Brewing, a non-alcoholic brewery, saw a more than 13,000% increase in revenue from its launch just in 2018 to 2021, 3 years, brewing 875 barrels in year one compared to 170,000 barrels in 2022. A timeout. Athletic Brewing, I'm a huge customer of theirs. I love their non-alcoholic brews, or NA beer, whatever you want to call it, near beer, whatever. They make some great stuff. Now, it's expensive, but to me, it's worth it. I can enjoy the taste of a finely crafted brew, which I love, and I don't have to have the alcohol. And these guys are getting, it used to be that non-alcoholic beer was gross. All right. Remember way back in the day, it was bad. These people are getting good at this. All right. As they study the ingredients and they figure out how to make it better and more palatable for beer fans, or, and we'll talk about spirits here in a second. They're getting good at it. I love Athletic Brewing stuff. If you're interested in having an option, where you want to have a few and still be able to drive home and not have the harmful effects of alcohol, I recommend Athletic Brewing. And in fact, a couple of their varieties are available in a lot of grocery stores now. But if you go on their website, they've got a whole bunch of cool stuff, including seasonal stuff. They had an Oktoberfest this past year. Great stuff. Article goes on. Ritual Zero Proof, a non-alcoholic spirits brand, says its drinks come with the burn reminiscent of alcohol. It's revolutionizing the drink of the summer, says Marcus Sacchi, co-founder of Ritual Beverage Company. It's taking off, said Paul Webb, head bartender at Nocturne in Denver, Colorado. Back in the day, a non-alcoholic or a mocktail was a bunch of juices thrown together. With these brands, it's really allowed us to get creative, he said. Yes, but, the article continues, non-alcoholic beverages still make up a low percentage of overall alcohol sales, only 0.47% of all alcohol sales from October 21 to October of 22. All right, so these numbers are kind of old. We can only assume that this trend is continuing. And I will tell you, at my local supermarket, that's all we're going to do with the article, by the way. When I go to my local supermarket, I have seen the non-alcoholic beer cooler, which used to be kind of one row. They would have like a Busch product. And of course, O'Doul's is usually there, Bud Zero. And those are all fine. Now they're expanding into these non-alcoholic craft brews, which is all the rage. They've got IPAs and they've got all these things that people like. And it's allowing people that don't want the booze to make a better choice. and still enjoy quality and taste. And people are catching on. After all, economic decisions are price and quality, right? If there's a value that you can assign to it, people are going to catch on. And these non-alcoholic brewers and distillers, if you will, and these words are all in quotes, because obviously you're not distilling if there's no alcohol, or maybe you're removing it. But however they make it, whatever elfin magic is there, it's a better choice often. And a lot of young people are globbing on to this. All right. And like I say, I'm a huge fan of this stuff. I've tried a non-alcoholic gin because I used to enjoy gin and tonic, especially in the summertime. That was always one of my favorites. And I will tell you, when you mix it with, and of course I do the diet tonic water because I'm in my 50s. And so I'm watching, my sugar intake and all that good stuff. You know what? It's not bad. It's not bad at all. It's fantastic. It still has that kind of that bite and that refreshment. So anyway, I'm a fan of this stuff. All right, enough fanboying. When I used my head thinking about this, after I left and you can hear the excitement because I think this is a great trend. All right, we'll have less drunk driving. We'll have less drunken jackassery and poor behavior. And that's better for everybody's health. However, as I used my head and started to think about this, I thought there's got to be a downside, right? There usually is a con to every pro. And what this article doesn't say, and I'm not criticizing the article, it's not the point, they're not addressing this. What it doesn't say is that young people still don't like to get high. And that got me thinking about old Mary Jane. Marijuana is more available and legal than ever. More and more states have recreational pot or they have medical pot where getting a card is laughably easy. So it's accessible. And I just wonder, okay, and I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here, pessimistic. I just wonder as I use my head if this is explaining part of this less alcohol trend. And again, it's not a lot. It's less than 0.5% a couple of years ago. So I can't imagine it's much more than that today. Even if it's tripled, that's just 1.5% of total, alcohol sales. I just wonder. I hope not. All right. I hope that this is just people going, you know what? There's some good choices and you don't have to worry about getting a driver and you don't have to be hungover the next day. And it still tastes good and it's still fun. And you can pretend that you're drinking a cocktail. I mean, that's why it's called a mocktail. The whole culture is there, holding the drink and stirring it with your pinky and all that. It allows you to not be standing there with the Diet Coke, which can feel awkward for people that are not drinkers. And I'll tell you, I've been there and it's a thing. All right. I've been in a room full of people that are, that are having drinks and having a good time. And as a non-drinker, I'm standing there with my soda. It can make you feel a little weird. And that's a psychological thing. But this takes that away. All this to say, I believe, and I'm not a temperance lecture. I'm not Carrie Nationing everybody and say, look, if you want to have some drinks, I think that's fine. There's not a thing wrong with that. And if you're smart and you use your head and you are, you're thinking clearly and moderating your behavior, there's not a thing wrong with it at all. I'm totally serious about that. My personal choice is that I don't do it. But if you do, that's great. But for people that, especially people that lean on booze because life's too stressful and this is the only way I can get through the day, that's a very dangerous line to toe. And it's a very short leap from there to dependency, and that can wreck your life. All right. And that just can. And we see it every day. And so if young people are going, yeah, you know what? There's better choices out there. That is using your head. And I think that's great. I hope that's what's going on here and that they're not just saying that, well, pot's more fun and whatever. I don't know. But sober, I do believe, and I'll stand by this, is always the better choice, in my opinion. Interesting stuff. Boom. The Use Your Head Podcast, Season 2, Episode number 1. Thanks for joining in. My name is John. I'm delighted that you're part of the family here. If you want to email us, our address is john@useyourheadpodcast.com. What might you put in an email to me? It might be a Happy New Year message. It might be a, I heard your thing about booze and you're an idiot. You're completely wrong. And here's why I think you're wrong. You can even record yourself with a topic suggestion or a debate item or a thought, comment, whatever you want to send me, just send it on over to john@useyourheadpodcast.com. Topic number 3, tech frenemies. Found this article from theverge.com. Tim Cook is donating $1 million to Trump's inauguration, too. Now, if you have, by the way, this article is by Jay Peters, who is a news editor there at theverge.com. If you're not sure what this is talking about, there's been a lot of news lately about a lot of big time tech people giving money to Donald Trump's inauguration campaign for the committee. And that what happens is they go out to Mar-a-Lago. This happened with Mark Zuckerberg from Meta, Facebook guy. He went out there and wrote a check. And this happened also with Jeff Bezos, the Amazon overlord, Sam Altman, CEO from OpenAI. I mean, these are the kings of big tech, right? These are the big names. They're giving money to Donald Trump's inauguration. And now Tim Cook, who is the CEO of Apple, has done the same thing. What's going on? Here's what the article says. Apple CEO Tim Cook is the next tech exec to donate $1 million to President-elect Donald Trump's inaugural committee, according to Axios. It's been an Axios-heavy show. Cook's donation follows similar commitments from OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos through Amazon, and Meta, as big tech companies and executives work to curry favor with the incoming administration. Cook famously built a personal relationship with Trump during his first term that other tech CEOs are looking to replicate. He was one of many to congratulate Trump after his Election Day victory, and Axios reports that Cook has met with Trump at Trump Tower and his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. Elon Musk, who dropped in on Bezos' dinner in December with Trump, joined part of Cook's dinner at Mar-a-Lago, Axios says. The New York Times previously reported that Cook met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Unnamed sources said Cook, a proud Alabama native, believes the inauguration is a great American tradition and is donating to the inauguration in the spirit of unity. Apple is not expected to donate to the inauguration. The company didn't immediately reply to a request for comment. All right, so that's the end of the article. Just a short little write-up here. Interesting stuff, though. I've been thinking about this since I first saw this happening. I was frankly stunned in a way, and I'll unpack this here in a second, when I heard that Zuckerberg was going out to Mar-a-Lago and then wrote a check. I was like, wait a minute. They've been at each other's throats through, the last several years. Trump accusing Zuckerberg of election interference and censorship and all the things that have been going on. When I used my head and thought about this, if nothing else, and again, these relationships with these bagazillionaires are very complicated and complex. But if nothing else, this is a little more than a classic definition of politics, right? I mean, that's what politics is. Those in power, people buddy up to them and you make deals in the back room. That's politics. That's what it is. That's why people knock on your door and vote for me. And that's why, companies will say, hey, listen, we'll make a donation if you'll, support our industry or whatever. And not all of it's bad. Some of it is illegal. We have rules, but people that follow the rules, there's not a thing wrong with it. This is called politics. It's kind of the straw that stirs the drink in our government. But big tech, and I'm talking big tech. So Meta, X, Apple, OpenAI for sure, Google, all these other companies. They have made massive gains in influence over the past decade. Another word for influence, of course, is power. Okay. And this was often very unfriendly, hostile even, to conservative ideas, right? During the past few years, especially during the Biden administration, these people were accused of, censoring or burying conservative friendly or Trump friendly stories and bringing and giving the platform almost solely to those on the other side. Okay. And so there's been a lot of arguing and fighting and litigation and things going on. Now it seems the worm has turned. And the easy answer is, well, yeah, of course it did. What do you think? Trump won the election. He's getting ready to be president. So of course they're going to suck up to him. That's politics. Yes, Trump's decisive win in November has clearly gotten their attention. And let's face it, Love him or hate him, Donald Trump has long been known as a gifted deal maker in his real estate business. He's a guy that can make deals. That's what he called his book, right? The Art of the Deal. This is what Donald Trump does. But when I used my head and kind of dug, because this on the surface, this is kind of like duh, right? So I wanted to go a little deeper. And what I started thinking about is, what does this really say about the influence of big tech? All right, look, the vast majority of people consume the vast majority of their news from technology. They read news on their phone from a variety of sources or on their computer. Or if they're watching TV, it's probably being streamed from tech. And let's face it, most of these, quote, news networks, the biggies, ABC, CBS, NBC, all these people, they're tech companies. I heard somebody tell me recently, we were talking about AI and the realization, and I've mentioned this before, that Hollywood, there is no film industry anymore. They're tech companies. So all these studios are actually just tech companies. That's what they are. And that explains their behavior recently a lot better in terms of their willingness to use CGI, AI, and different things. I think the same thing is true when we're talking about, putting ideas into people's heads. I mean, when people sit there and veg out on Facebook and scroll for hours on end, they're absorbing the ideas that Facebook wants them to see. And the same is true for everything, every site, on all parts of the political spectrum, from the far left to the far right and everything in between. The idea is, what ideas can we put in front of people so that they will absorb them? And hopefully at the end of the day, it will result in votes and money. The influence of big tech, and I think a lot of people tend to think, because a lot of these companies are out in California, and California tends to be left-leaning, are going to support the left no matter what. The fact is that the influence of big tech is completely up for sale for those who can afford the high price tag. And there's not very many of those. Donald Trump is one of them, not just because he himself is a gazillionaire, he's part of that club, but also he is a gifted deal maker. And oh, by the way, he was just elected president of the United States again. And will have 4 years of influence, that bully pulpit, which he uses to great effect, let's face it, will have a pretty significant impact on what big tech's future is going to look like. And so we have people giving money to this inauguration committee. Now, one other thing I wanted to note, and the article does point this out, but it's easy to miss if you're not looking for it. Sometimes these are the individuals. So in Tim Cook's case, Tim Cook wrote a check out of his personal funds. It's not Apple giving, it's Tim Cook giving. However, Jeff Bezos, who's the boss at Amazon, gave through his company. So Amazon donated. There's a difference there. Okay, these people, these CEOs can give out of their personal funds, or they can make corporate gifts. And so there's a difference there. Apple, of course, was asked, are you guys going to, Apple is not expected to, but they didn't reply for a request to comment. So, you can kind of weigh this, and, Tim Cook has kind of a history with Donald Trump, which the article pointed out. In his first term, they were friendly with one another and so forth. So anyway, this is kind of interesting. I don't think it's fascinating that they're giving money to the incoming president of the United States. They would be foolish, frankly, not to. And given the kind of the bad blood that's been happening over the past few years, they're probably trying to, bury the hatchet in some ways and go, so how can we work together? But the idea that big tech, just because they're out in California and with the politics in that part of the country tending to be left-leaning, sometimes hard left-leaning, depending on where you are and who you're talking about, I started thinking, you know what? That's not necessarily the case. It depends on who's in the White House and who's in power. And more than that, if that person is a particularly gifted business person and deal maker, and Donald Trump, like I say, love him or hate him, and usually people are not in the middle there. They either love him or they loathe him. Wherever you are on that, I think if you used your head, you had to admit he's a gifted deal maker. You may not like the deals he makes, or you may love the deals he makes, but he's good at making deals with just about anybody. And that's just a gift he has, and he brings that to bear with the bully pulpit of the White House. And it looks to me like that big tech is starting to leverage some things and seeing if maybe they can retain some of that influence that they've worked so hard to gain over the past several years. We are out of time for this premiere episode of Season 2 of the Use Your Head podcast. If you have thoughts, let me know. John at useyourheadpodcast.com. Other than that, we'll see you next week. Have a good one. Stay warm. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.